honored today to introduce our speaker, who is the spiritual leader of the Centers for Spiritual Living. So for the entire international organization, he is the spiritual leader, and he goes forth into the world to connect with people, to tell them about the science of mind and spirit. So that's his duty in the world, is to be the face of religious science, of the science of mind and spirit, out to all kinds of individuals and organizations around the world. And he's spoken at the World Parliament of Churches. He has joined the board of directors or trustees, I'm not sure which it is, for the Association for Global New Thought. He is making strategic alliances with other organizations. He has a blog on Pantheos, which is a theological blogging site for international religious leaders. And so we are just honored and privileged to have him with us today. Please help me welcome the Reverend Dr. Kenn Gordon.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you so much. I've got the greatest job in the world, I really do. I just get to travel around and be with people like you. How can you beat that? I was thinking about it on the way here, as a matter of fact. I was wondering, having been out of the corporate world to a certain degree, and having had experiences of having to take stuff with me everywhere I went, when Reverend Madeline and I were traveling here to the center this morning, suddenly reminded myself when I was leaving the house that I didn't have to take anything with me except what I've got on and what sits between my ears. There was no briefcase with me. There was no real heavy notes to take with me. I just get to show up and be who I am. And what I found in my experience is that when I do that, when I actually show up as who I am and be transparent, whether it be a little bit neurotic or a little bit fearful or a whole pile loving, it really doesn't matter. That's all that's required of me in this life. I will tell you something. That's all that's required of you in this life, but we could only embrace that and know that to be the truth of who we are. I'm so incredibly honored to be here today. This is a center which has deep roots with me. I was here 5 years ago as the president of Religious Science International at that time, in order to be able to celebrate Reverend Lonnie becoming the minister here. And I remember we went to the same Unity Center and we had this celebration, and it was something that I remembered and I held, and I look forward to coming back here again. I like you people. And yesterday with Reverend Madeline, how many people were there yesterday? Oh, good. Well, then I won't even talk about that. That was special too. As you know, Madeline and I have known each other for a long time. David Walker once told me, and Reverend David, or Dr. David, was the president of Religious Science International for several years, and he once told me about his most embarrassing moment. He said that what occurred was he was at Merrill Hall at Asilomar one year, and he was sitting at the very back of Asilomar. And he was sitting there and watching the speakers come up, and he said that he was just absolutely ridden with judgment of everybody. They would walk up there and they would give their talk, and he would sit there and critique what they were doing. He'd go, oh yeah, look at that. That person's socks don't match, or that person speaks too slowly, or that person isn't doing this right or doing that right. And he said this elderly minister came up onto stage, and when she came up onto stage, she had a package of materials with her, her speech and things like that. And when she got to the podium, what she did was nervously shuffled to the podium and put everything down onto the podium and opened it up. And when she opened it up, it all slid off the podium and fell onto the floor. And so then she proceeded to get down on her hands and knees and pick up all the papers and put them all into order again, and then stand back up, and then she had to stand there and she had to work through the pages to make sure they were in the right order so that she could give her talk in the right order, and put them all together. And then she finally looked up and she said her first words, and what she said was, "No matter what you're thinking about me at this particular moment, I want you to know it's about you." And Dr. David said he just about fell off his chair because, of course, he was absolutely steeped in seeing the critique and looking at that other individual and just absolutely cutting and barbing everywhere that he could because it was a reflection of his own deepest fears of what was going on in his own life. It was that disowned energy that he had no intention whatsoever of experiencing himself because he felt he was so much greater and grander than that. And so what he could do is he could cast his judgment out onto other people and not at one particular moment or one particular time in the experience bother to have any kind of compassion, empathy, or understanding as to what was going on. And in that sharing, the minister managed to demonstrate and reflect to Dr. David, who was really at fault when we're looking at things and seeing things through the eyes that are not clear. To be able to recognize and see the Christ in all individuals and in everything that we see is really first to be able to recognize it within our own self. To know that the judgment that we put out and that we participate in these areas is a judgment that is really based on the confines and the limitations of our own belief system, on what we think is necessary for us to appear like we're transparent, authentic, honest, worthy, successful. And the truth is that that protective mechanism we put out there actually taints and distorts our lives in the views that we have with other people. And that the healing, the wholeness that must come from that is the realization and the recognition that the only place to start to be able to recognize the magnificence, the beauty, and the truth in anyone must begin within our own selves. You know, our lives are made up of the confines of our belief. We build our own walls. I teach my students that if they want to experience the Christ consciousness, it's really, really easy. And we can do it just like that if you're willing to do it and if it's possible for you to be able to do it. And I won't go through the exercise with you here. And the reason I won't do that is because it's a joke and it'll make you feel badly at the end of it. And I don't want to hurt you. But what I would do with my students is I would ask them to close their eyes and take a breath. And then I would enter into a very short meditation. And at the conclusion of the meditation, I would say, all you need to do in order to experience the Christ consciousness within your own self is right here and right now, remove all judgment from your life. Take it out. And then I'd say, okay, open your eyes. And I'd say, how many people have succeeded? And of course, no one did, including myself, I might add. Because that really is the key to where that all comes from, is that the judgment that we have and that we put around others, and the judgment we have that we put around our own selves, is the limitation of our experience. That if we were to surrender ourselves in totality and really do the exercise of not having a past and not having a future, not having the historical values that we have put on ourselves by our past, which creates a framework and a wall which really keeps us limited, and not to have a desire, anticipation, or expectation for what's going to happen in the future, which puts the other wall and limitation around us, then what would happen and what would be left would be the present moment where all the power of the universe resides, and in that present moment, you would be perfect, whole, and complete. Without past and without future, there would be no pain, there would be no hunger, there would be no hatred, there would be no violence, there would be no lack. There would only be the presence of the truth of who you are and its perfection residing there. Everything else we construct and we build with our memory and with our imagination in anticipation of what's going to show up in our experience and in our lives. Pardon me. I have a cold. That activity and that action of that judgment is based on the framework of our experience of who we are, why we are, and what our life looks like. And the only way to rise above it The only way to move into a new place, a new consciousness, a new idea, is to develop that within ourselves to the place where what we can do is we can begin to emulate the outside as opposed to the inside, and realize that when we look at each other, when we talk to each other, and when we judge each other, when we're angry at someone, when we love someone, that what we're really doing is we're reflecting our own needs and our own requirements within our own self. When we can do that, what we will see as the Christ saw. And we will see the Christ consciousness in every human being, because we will first recognize it within our own selves. And we don't have to be limited by our experiences. What we have to do is we have to transcend them and transform them. I recently was at an AG&T meeting, and we were in the Leadership Council. And to begin with the Leadership Council, what we did was we shared, just like you would in any meeting in a church organization. And we sat around and we would say, so what's going on in your life? And there's 10 or 11 of us or 12 of us on this council. So we started on one day and we began to share. And the sharing soon led to the fact that we were all doing the same thing. What we were doing is we were awakening to a desire and a requirement within our own personal lives for deepening. So the next week, or the next day, we brought in all of the additional ministers, very influential ministers, and we sat in a circle, and there was maybe 40 of us in the circle, and the remaining 30 began to share, and it turned out that all they were doing was the same thing, is that there was a requirement or a feeling and a sense within them that what was required in their life and in their ministries at this particular moment was to provide a deepening. I will tell you something, is that deepening is our ability to be able to consciously evolve what is happening in the world around us. And it's not just being called upon for a select few. What I'm finding is that it's being called upon by everyone. What I'm beginning to realize and recognize is that the circumstances and the situations of the desire for that change in the world is happening all over the world with everyone. And that means that it's probably occurring in your life. There's something within you that is reaching out to be reborn in spirit, which is the theme for this month. There's something in you which is struggling to be able to find a different form. And our teaching, which is so valuable and so wonderful, and it certainly transformed my life over the years, really lends and leads to it. But over the last few years, what we've had the tradition to do is that we've become kind of well known in the world around us as being a self-help group. Has anyone heard that or sensed that? That a lot of people that we come in contact with begin to say, "Oh yes, religious science or science of mind, that's wonderful, but it's so selfish. It's so self-helping. It's all about how to find parking spots or build greater wealth or serve our own beings." And it's definitely got some truth in it, and for decades we've been playing that role. And it's not that it's not a good role, it's not that it's not a vital role, it's not that it's not a needed role, but there's something larger that's happening in the evolution of consciousness of humanity right now. It's not just enough to be good, we have to begin to do good. And there's something within us which is drawing and pulling us to that, which is tugging on our shirt sleeves to be able to get us to move forward in that particular direction. Dr. Holmes, our founder, said, there is a power in the universe that is greater than I am, and it is mine to use, or it is ours to use. And I think that what the transformational change and where the pull in my life over the last couple of years has come from is there is a power in the universe that is greater than I am, and it can use me. And I think that it requires that transformational switch to be able to make that change. And I think that transformational switch will lift us up and lift me up. I'll speak for myself because there are always avatars in a room like this, and I don't want to put anything into mind that does not exist for you. But it lifts me up to a place of realization and recognition that when I can surrender myself to this truth that we teach, that the end result out of that surrender is that I become whole, I become perfect, I become complete, I become present, and I see the world in the same manner. But for me to do that, what I have to stop doing is trying to pretend that I know how to work it out. That there's something within me that knows the answers, and they're better answers than what Spirit itself provides. Does anyone have that experience where one person? Great. But that's the experience that I found in my life, is that in the times of my darkest times, what I'm trying to do is I am trying to figure out how to make things work, and then what I'm pretending to do is surrender it over to a higher spirit, the higher spirit within me, the higher intelligence within me, the greater me. And I'm trying to surrender it over, but the little me is trying to pull all the switches and make everything work. I teach my students that, there is a power that is greater than I am, and it can use me. And I give the example of the fact that I tried to put together an oak tree, but I couldn't get the molecules to all fit. Whereas there's a power in the universe that does it in perfection. And yet within my own life, when I run into something that looks conflictual, when I run into something that is uncomfortable, when I run into something that is painful, what I start to do is I start to not listen to my own higher power and my own greater self. Instead, what I do is I fall back on that pattern that came from the past. And I try to figure out how to fix it from the way that I would have done it before. I try to work my way through it to be able to establish, and there's no way. All I get when I do that is the same experience I had when I did it last time. And what is required to step into the evolution of humankind, the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of our society to be able to grow, is to surrender and let go of that side and that aspect. To find a place and a way that what I can do is I can actually have a greater faith and trust in the higher power that has moved me throughout my life and be able to surrender to it instead of trying to control it. Instead of trying to manage my problems, what I can do is turn them over. Because that's the situation that we've utilized, this wonderful power that Ernest Holmes has shared with us for so many years. So many people use it to manage their existing problems instead of discovering a new being within themselves that automatically rises above that existed before. When I was farming in Southern California and I was in ministerial school, or I was a practitioner at the time, I ran into some very, very deep and dark issues in my life. I ran into some times and some places where I just couldn't figure out how things were going to work anymore. And even though I was a practitioner, what I kept doing was I kept trying to recreate it all the time. I kept trying to take and say, I know what the solution is, and all I need to do is this. And I would do this, and the problem could get worse. So I'd say, I read this book, and it said that the answer is to do this. So I would try to do this, and all it did was reproduce what I was doing before. Because I wasn't prepared to let go. I wasn't prepared to surrender to the Christ consciousness within myself because I didn't recognize that Christ consciousness within myself. I thought I was perfect, whole, and complete, as the song goes. But I wasn't. And nor are any of us at this time and this level. And so when it comes to having spirit reborn within me, when it comes to that place, the first point I need to do is I need to be able to surrender and let go. I cannot do it from the consciousness I was born from. I cannot do it with what I came from before. What I have to do is release and remove what my prior beliefs were. And that means that there has to be something somewhere, somehow, that I can put my faith back into again. And even as a practitioner in those days, and I was a good practitioner, I could, believe me, you're perfect, whole, and complete, I can fix that too. I had everything set up so that I knew how to use the law so that what I could do is manage pain. Instead of using the law to rise above what my preconceived notion was. And so I found myself in a situation where I was in this turmoil in my life, and I just kept spiraling down and down and down and down. So I phoned my practitioner one day, and I said to him, and he became a minister as well. His name's Reverend Tony Heggie. And I phoned him and I said, Tony, I need some help. I need some practitioner work here. And he said, okay, Ken, no problem. I'll give you a practitioner. Let's do a treatment. I said, no, I don't want any of those treatments. Because I don't. Because I've been doing them and they haven't been bringing anything forward in my life other than what I've already got. I said, this isn't working for me. I said, what I want you to do as my friend and my practitioner is I want you to tell me what to do. I'm stuck. I'm living a life farming. I'm living a life that is less than creative, less than successful in the way I look at it. My relationship is tenuous at this particular point. My finances are almost non-existent, and it's beginning to affect my health. Hack, hack, cough, cough. And so what I need for you to do is tell me something to do. And so he said, okay, I'll tell you 3 things to do. And so he did. He proceeded to let me know 3 different steps that I could go through. Step number 1 was, he said, what you need to do is create a gratitude list. And I said, a gratitude list? He said, yes, what I want you to do is every night before you go to bed, I want you to list 10 things that you're grateful for. I said, okay, I can do that. He said, all right, and I want you to do it every night, and I don't ever want you to repeat the same thing over again. So if I say I'm grateful for Lanny on Monday night, I can't say I'm grateful for Lanny on Tuesday night. I have to be grateful for something else. I got to the point where I was beginning to realize how grateful I was for shoelaces and things like that. Anyway, he said, you've got to do that. He said, the second thing that you must do is, he said that, what have you been treating for in your treatment work? And I said, well, I've been treating for myself. I've been treating to rise above this depression. He said, oh, okay, well, here's what you need to do now. He said, you need to treat for something bigger than yourself. You need to be able to cast yourself out into an area and arena that you have never been in before and that you do not know is possible. And so at that particular point, what I did was I began to treat for world peace, which I do today. I still do a gratitude list, and I still treat for world peace every day. And so he said, okay, so now that you've done that, now the third thing I want you to do is I want you to do something different. I said, what do you mean different? He said, well, what I would like to do is I would like you to take a class or a course in something that you've never done before. Something that interests you, but that you're not really focused on at this point. And I said, okay. And so I signed up at the local college and took a creative writing course. Well, I'll tell you, within about 2 weeks, I had been lifted above my miasma. I lifted above my ennui, lifted above my depression. And so later, years later, I would ask him what he was doing and where he got all that great information from. He said, I made it up. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, here's what I knew. I knew that you were stuck in your past experience, and that what you were trying to do is recreate something new from something old. And what you needed was something new in your life to be able to bring that forward. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. So the gratitude list moved my focus from my problems to what is good in life. I will tell you that the world around us, I challenge you to step outside the doors here and look around you and not recognize that 99% of the world is working in perfection. That 1% that seems to be out of kilter with us seems to be where we focus our intention on and where we focus our obsessive behavior on. And I'll share something further with you, is that if you move your energy off of that obsessive negativity, and all you have to do is witness the awe that's all around us. Erica and Lisa sing, if you're not living in awe, then you're not paying attention. And just witness that, and what will happen is this will take care of itself, and this will expand in your view. The second thing was the treatment for something larger than myself. It happened to be world peace in my case, but it really could be anything. It was outside the branches and the realm of my own consciousness, outside of my own belief system at that particular point. And the end result was that it was something that I couldn't do by myself. I couldn't create it by myself. I couldn't make it happen. I didn't know how. It wasn't a goal, it was a vision. And the vision lay out there in repose and still does today, so that I can look out at it and I can recognize and know that it's not for me to figure out how to do it. It's for me to keep my energy and my intention on it and take every step that's necessary to get to it, but at the same time have the patience to understand that it must happen. In other words, to have a greater faith in what's going on in the world around me than what I'd had up until that time. Quit trying to manipulate my life and instead surrender to something that's larger. So I know our vision for our centers, for Center for Spiritual Living, our purpose is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and our vision is to create a world that works for all. So I know that that's what is going to happen because I've set it into motion, so have you. It lays there before me, and what it's called upon us to do is to do everything in front of us, including when the movement happens and the motion happens, to deepen. If Spirit says deepen, I deepen, because I know that that before me must be the perfection. And if Spirit says also that looks like in this form, I accept it in that form and I move towards it. And I do not allow my energy to move from that to something else. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. That's where we move. The other one is the course itself, the class, which is really the big red herring in the whole thing, because what was happening was I didn't know anything new. I mean, I wonder how many of us here are in that particular situation where we pretty much know what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we've got it all down pat right now. How many people here have taken science mind classes? How many haven't? Right. So when you get yourself in a situation, it really doesn't matter what course you take. The point is that it gives you a new idea, a new spark, something new and fresh to be able to look at. A new way to be able to put your life into a bigger box, not the box you've had before. Those walls that maintain and retain our consciousness are not walls that are set into place. We get to move them if we want. And our job, or my job, is to be able to move my walls constantly, to be able to expand it out. We have this brilliant idea in our mind about this teaching, which goes back to, instead of allowing it to use us using it to be able to manage our pain. If you visualize your consciousness meaning the sum total of your belief, if you, conscious and unconscious, if you visualize it as a circle, as a balloon, let's say, our tendency as human beings, my tendency as a human being, I apologize, is to want something outside of my balloon, to see it over here. And so what I do is I have my balloon of my consciousness, and I see what I want over there, a red sports car. And so what I do is I try to reach out so that my balloon starts to look like this. Got it? And that's how we think we create form, some of us. I keep going to you. That's how I used to think that I would create form. And the truth of the matter is you'll never create the form looking like that. You'll never get what you're seeking if you think that you can break outside your consciousness in that one little loop. In other words, I want my bank account to be the same. I want my wife to be the same. I want my children to be the same. I want my community to be the same. I want my government to be the same. I want all of the safety and security that I perceive in the world around me, and I want it all to stay there, but I want something new at the same time, and I don't want to change any of that. And so the minute that you recognize and realize that to receive that, it's not a matter of reaching out, but it's a matter of enlarging your consciousness so that it becomes bigger and bigger, so that it eventually encompasses what it is that you want. The minute that you take that activity and that action, your life changes for the better, because that's the higher power in you working and moving. That's the greatness and the goodness that you were born to be, having its being within you. We all have a desire, whether you're an avatar or not, to move into a greater realm of consciousness and being than what we have right now. Your life could be in perfection, but you're still reaching for something fresh, evolving into something new. And we have to break that pattern and that belief that somehow or other we're stuck where we're at or resigned to be where we're at. And understand that that growth of our being means growing at all. And to do that, the surrender aspect is this. For me, I had to surrender my wife, my bank account, my children, my home, my titles. I had to surrender everything in order to be able to grow the balloon of my consciousness to encompass what it is that I want. And I will tell you, when we lay before us a world that works for all, it demands that we surrender everything else in order to achieve that. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's. We must be prepared to pay that price. Now, I'll tell you what the key and the secret to it is that I have witnessed in my years, is that every time I have given it up and surrendered it, every time I have laid it aside and said, you know, the greatness and the goodness of life is more fulfilling, more demanding, a greater requirement and a higher priority than the things that I have in my being. The minute that I surrender that, I walk through a veil, the balloon expands, encompasses a new thing, and I look around and everything is greater and richer than it ever was before. My wife, my home, my family, my titles, my bank account, everything is richer and deeper than it ever was before. And to get there, what I needed to do was give it up so that I could envelop a new idea and a new ideal. This is the way it works. Mary Oliver wrote a beautiful poem that I always remember. And Mary Oliver, in her poem, what she wrote was this. She said, "Now listen to me carefully and I will tell you the truth." And when Mary Oliver says she's going to tell you the truth, I presume that that's going to be the truth. And she said, everything in the universe comes, at least nearer, and it comes cordially. The walls that we have built around ourselves, the restrictions and the limitations that we have created in our belief system, are restrictions and limitations that have kept us where we're at. If we intend on expanding into a greater greatness, as individuals, if we intend on having greater creative expression, if we intend on having more abundance and prosperity, if we intend on having greater compassion and understanding, if we intend on having a greater receptivity and expression of love, if we intend on being more vital and energetic than we've ever been before, we must be prepared to give up our concept of past and our anxiety around the future. And that means that there comes a time within us that we must surrender to that higher power and actually put legs to the faith that we pretend that we have. And know that that power that exists right now exists for the purpose of being able to take us to a greatness, take us to a higher element of being than we've ever been before, and that what we leave behind is either there when we get there, or else there is something better that takes its shape and takes its place. This is my truth for today, and I thank you and I bless you for sharing this with me.
There are people who give only to receive what they're really after, and that's okay. That's their path, let it be. There are people who take all their hearts demand, and less wanting, it's a little sad, but that's their path, let it be. Then there are people who take what is in their heart seeking nothing. That's their path, let it be. When I'm feeling low, there's a place where I can go to hear a kind word, to feel wanted, hold a hand, sing a song. And it seems such a small thing, but to some, this is the only place they know where they can get that from those who shine their light on love. You point the way. Feeling low, there's a place where I can go to hear a kind word, to feel wanted, hold a hand, sing a song. It seems such a small thing, but to some, this is the only place they know where they can get that from those who shine their light on love. From those who shine